What's one thing they should start doing now?
I think you have to be preparing, and a lot of times the gold standard is they tell people you want to prepare for 1 to 2 years before you're actually going to go sell. And the reason that people say that is because you want to. There's so many things. You asked me to give one, I'm going to have to give several because I think it's really important. But you want to have a team around you. You want to have a tax accountant that's really good so they can help you with tax strategy of what does it look like when you sell. You want to have a financial advisor because how do you make the decision to sell your number one or biggest asset that you've built over these years? And you're kind of going into that like second half of, air quote retirement. You've got to know what amount of money you need to achieve your personal goals for what that looks like. You also need to identify or have an M&A attorney. I think that's a really important component to going through an exit.
So the big question is this: how do veterinarians like you, who live demanding lives,
who never seem to have enough time, able to achieve balance and take control of your finances with confidence?
That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
We are Florida Veterinary Advisors, and this is the Smarter Vet Podcast. Hey, Smarter Vet, welcome back to the Smarter Vet Financial Podcast. I am your co-host, Tom Seeko, and co-founder of Florida Veterinary Advisors. We are a national personal and business financial planning firm, providing a different way of thinking to make financial decisions easy so you can spend time doing the other things that you love. We've got a lot of great resources. If you've not checked us out before, our website has abundance of masterclasses, race CEs. You can find a copy of our book through our website. Listen to this podcast as well. If you want to, you can go all through our website at flvetadvisors.com. We're always trying to bring really good people onto the show to be able to just help you all live better lives, be able to make better decisions, create great habits and behaviors along the way. And today I'm joined by two professionals who know the ins and outs of one of the biggest decisions a veterinary practice will ever make, and it's selling their business. First, we have Matt Arena, the founder of 360 Vet Sales. He has a strong background in private equity, accounting, and business ownership. He built 360 Vet Sales to bring a smarter, more transparent approach to selling veterinary practices, helping owners not just get the right price, but also the right deal. And also I have Kia Banisadre, who is the business development officer. He brings a deep market insight and boots on the ground experience when it comes to what buyers are looking for, how deals are structured, and what it really takes to help sellers navigate the process smoothly. Together, they're helping practice owners get a lot of clarity, avoid costly missteps, and transition with confidence. And if you're not in a position of selling or you're just starting to explore your options, you're going to get a ton of value from our conversation today. So, Matt, Kia, I'm really happy to have you both here. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
I believe this is going to be a fun conversation, and this is something that it's on a lot of people's minds. And, to start off, Matt, let's start with what inspired you to create 360 Sales and why in the veterinary space?
So, you mentioned that I was a business owner, and I own an accounting firm that does managerial accounting for small and mid-sized companies. And so throughout my career in that space, I've always been telling people that I'll help them with exit strategy or help them prepare to sell, go to market, things of that nature. And we had a veterinary practice in the around the Dallas area of Texas that reached out to us to help them with their accounting. Their margins were not in order. They knew that there was things in their accounting that were not right. And so they had reached out to us in the accounting firm, and about 6 or 7 months later, once we had everything really cleaned up and we fixed their margins and got their profitability more in line, they said, we knew that you could help sell companies, and we wanted to see if you thought you could help us sell our practice. And so I started that process with them, completed that sale for them. And basically, once I had done that for them, it was two partners that owned the practice. They then had told their friends about me. They were really pleased with how it went, how, from start to finish, they felt like they got a really good service and were really pleased with the results. And one of the owners actually owned his own practice. So he said, he came to me also and said, you think you could sell this practice? And so through word of mouth, I started selling practices one after another. And that was when I was starting to get to the point where I'm thinking to myself, I probably shouldn't be doing this under an accounting firm's name, and I should make this a real thing. And then, I met Kia, and I had worked together on some other projects, and, we decided to work together and start this.
That's awesome. And Kia, to ping this over to you, what drew you into this mission? How did you all connect? What was the story behind that?
Yeah. So as Matt mentioned, he and I had worked on different projects before. Both of us do consulting for startups in different industries. So we worked together before, where he was a CFO and I was a management consultant for a startup. So I knew how he worked. I knew, what he was about. I knew, through that time, we got to know each other a little bit. We became friendly. I got a sense of who he was as a person and, how he ran his accounting company. Fast forward a couple years later, I'm actually calling him to refer a friend of mine over, that was an accounting client. And we got to talking. And during that time, he's like, "What have you been up to lately?" And I was actually helping my dad sell his medical oncology practice in the people health space. And so Matt goes, "Oh, did you know I sell veterinary clinics?" And I said, "I didn't realize that was a thing." And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's a thing." And then he said, "Well, let me, you're in sales and marketing and business development. Let me, pick your brain a little bit about whether or not, it makes sense to kind of spin this off into a separate company." And so I listened to what he had to say. He told me about, how the industry was working, what the market looked like, um, you know, the buyer mix, everything. And from there I said, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, I think there's space for a company to do, to spin it off into its own separate company and to do, what you're doing very separate from your accounting firm." And he said, at the end of the conversation, he said, "Well, I appreciate your feedback. If I were to do this, would you join me? Would you come in and run the sales and business development aspect of it?" And I said, kind of, in my mind, I didn't think much of it. We were just having a conversation. And I said, "Yeah, sure, sure. If you do this, I'll join you." And I remember very distinctly, this was the Friday before Labor Day. That Tuesday morning, I get a call from Matt first thing after the holiday. And he says, "Hey, well, I thought about what you said. I'm going to do it. And you said you would do it. So you're in, right?" And I said, I guess I'm in, and it was interesting because my entire career up to that point was mostly in the people health space. So it was a little bit of an adjustment for me to come into this, not knowing much about the veterinary space. But, over the course of the last almost 3 years now, I've learned a lot about the veterinary space, and it's been a great move for me. I really enjoy what we do. I really enjoy the fact that we're helping people change their lives. So it's been pretty awesome. So I'm glad we had that conversation.
I love it. I remember when this echoes a lot on two of my story within veterinary medicine, because I knew zero people in this field when
Yeah,
we started off, and here we are many years later. And I love working with this community.
they're
The
great
people
people.
in it are amazing.
They
Really
really are.
great industry to work in. Yeah.
So so
I
talking
like it that like we can wear jeans to work. I think that's pretty cool.
right. I know. Well, that's funny you bring that up, because I used to be in a suit and a tie all the
Yeah,
time.
Yep.
yeah.
Of course, COVID, I think, changed a lot of that. But going in there, it's like you either got to dress at their level or a little
Mhm.
higher. And I'm like, well, if everyone's wearing t-shirts and shorts, I'm like,
Yeah,
I'll throw on a polo and I'll be cool. Like
Yep.
yeah.
everything's good.
You don't want to look like an outsider. Yeah, so it is
Yeah,
pretty cool.
that's awesome. When you do think about, practice owners wanting to sell, what are the biggest misconceptions? Like one of the biggest misconceptions that people have before they sell?
Well, I would say the one right out of the gate that we see a lot is a lot of people think of these corporate platforms. They hear kind of like the rumor mill, and they
Mhm.
think, I don't, because we hear it quite often. I don't want to sell to corporate. I'd prefer not to sell to corporate. Like, it's getting a little bit better. I think with time, the industry has adjusted and learned more that there could be some bad experience with corporate, and maybe you're hearing a lot more of those, but overwhelmingly there are very good corporate groups out there that are consolidating and doing a really good job of doing it.
And to piggyback on that, I think the stories that you hear about kind of like the bad experiences are more like I was sold a bill of goods, we sold, and then we came in, and then it became very corporatized. They started messing with our standard of care, they started messing with our staff, they started doing these things. I think those stories are absolutely legitimate. Those things do exist. But, I think what Matt's pointing out is we've seen over the course of time that there are corporate groups out there that are not buying you to come in there and cookie cutter your place and change everything that you're doing into what they're doing. There are groups out there now that look at what you're doing and say, "Hey, you guys are doing something right. I want to invest in that. We're not going to change anything. Maybe we'll change how you take your credit cards, or maybe we'll change how you clock in. But really, we don't want anybody to know that this is a corporate owned practice. We're not going to touch your standard of care. we're not going to touch the name of the practice. We're going to treat your staff as well as you treat them, if not better. We're not going to, get rid of anybody. This is kind of like the newer kind of model that we're seeing with corporate. And I think that, so far so good, through all the clients that we've done and, sold to these types of groups, when we go back with them and talk with them after the fact, at post transition, to say, hey, did it meet your expectations? Did everything that the group told you was going to happen? And the overwhelming answer is yes. What they promised us is exactly what occurred. Are there times here and there where there's one little thing here, one little thing there that isn't exactly how it was described going into the sale? There are a few of those instances, but overwhelmingly, I think that what we're seeing is that the corporate model and the newer kind of corporate groups, the ones that are most aggressive out there, are not the ones coming in there and changing everything. And so I think that, that's where a lot of the misconception comes from.
Okay.
I think the other thing that I would say, in terms of, a misconception before selling, is I have to be ready to retire before I'm going to sell. That is one where we're almost like, you should not be in a place where you're retiring tomorrow, or you want to retire tomorrow if you want to sell, because if you do sell and you sell to a corporate group, they're going to want you to stick around for somewhere between 3 to 5 years. So exit planning becomes important. Strategizing becomes important. You want to make that move 3 to 5 years before you're selling. If you come to us and say, I need to retire tomorrow, I can't do this anymore, your negotiating leverage is really diminished at that point.
Kia, to follow up what you're talking about here, business, when they go to sell, it's not just a business deal, but it is very personal. Especially a lot of them have their identities wrapped up in it.
Mm-hmm.
What emotional challenge, or let's say a big emotional challenge, do a lot of them face, and how are you all help guiding them through it?
That's a great question. I'm going to let Matt jump in after I say my part. I have a unique experience in that my own father went through this. A practice that he built, not in the veterinary space, but he built a business. He built a medical practice over the course of 40 years. I saw in the background everything that they went through. I think the first thing that comes up is, if you've spent time, any of us that have ever owned a business know that if you spent time on it, at some point you're kind of treating it like your baby. You've put all your heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears into it. There is this emotional component of letting go of that, right? It's like, if you create this, let's say you're a painter and you create this great work of art, and then one day you have to sell it. I'm sure that as much as you'd like to make money on selling it, there's part of it that pulls at your heartstrings, saying, well, this was me. This is everything that I did. And now I'm kind of letting go of that. That's tough. I think the other emotional component that I see a lot is people are genuinely concerned about not themselves, but about their colleagues, about their staff, those kinds of things. I think that's an emotional component that can't be overlooked, which is, are you going to make a sale, and is it going to affect everybody else that works for you? They have these, long-standing relationships with their people. We have to be very cognizant of that and make sure that we're protecting that when we go into a sales process. So those are in my mind, those are a couple of things that really stand out from the emotional standpoint.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I spend a lot of time as we go through the process and we really dive into going to market and then getting offers and then going through due diligence, working with our clients and talking to them, because I know in the background they're going through an emotionally draining process. I mean, they are sitting there looking at the idea of, am I sure this is the right thing to do to sell? Because even though they feel like it's the right thing to do, as you're going through it, there's something in the back of your mind that makes you a little nervous. And then there's the worry of your staff, and there's the worry of the changes. And, you also run into a little bit of, they might get a little bit of information that tells them that, well, I'm not sure how they're doing, how they're going to do this or how they're going to do that, and how that's going to affect my business. And are they going to take a business that I've built and I don't want to say run it into the ground, but make it not as good as it was? Is it going to be different? Is it going to change? And these things make them very nervous. And so I find that what we do to really help them through that, we're not perfect at it, I'm sure, but I have gotten feedback from some of our customers that they really appreciated us talking through all of those components and being able to in a sense, educate them on, look, this is what they're going to end up doing. When they're done with this process, we will make sure that you are in the best possible place and that your legacy kind of lives on in your business and it's going the right way. And it's something we really pride ourselves on, and making sure that we can help them work through those things.
Yeah, and I think legacy is a really important thing here, because the legacy is not just the name of the building and the name of the practice, but think about, if you're a veterinarian in any sort of community, you walk into the store, you walk into a restaurant, you're going to run into your customers. You're going to say, oh, you helped me 10 years ago with my dog, or you helped me recently with my cat. It's they want to make sure that even within their communities, they still have that standing, that if they do sell to, let's say, a corporate group, that the community is still going to feel very comfortable that they're going to get the best vet care when they go to that clinic. That won't change. And so there is that emotional component of it too. And I think Matt brings up a really good point. A lot of this is understanding our clients up front. We're not the type of firm that tries to bring in 100 clients a year. We really try to limit ourselves in terms of how many clients we can bring in every year, because it allows us to know those clients really well. It allows us to know what's really important to them. And so that when we go tell the story to the corporate buyers, when we are very much aware of what is important to our client, and we can make sure that in those negotiations, we're getting those things in there, so that our clients can feel very comfortable at the end that they're making the right decision. If I can also just add one thing, Matt said, a lot of times there's nervousness when you go into this process. And, butterflies are normal for anything that's kind of new and big. However, we also advise our clients, if you're just not ready, then don't go to market. If you just have a bad feeling, a pit in your stomach, then it's just not the right time for you. And that's okay. You can always come back to market later. But, you don't want to you put your clients in a position where they're going to regret it, what they're doing.
Right. I agree with you on that one. There's people that have approached us in the past where they're getting these really enticing offers too from buying groups or people that are coming in here just waving dollar bills in front of them. And sometimes it's having to be able to take a step back and, one thing, are they financially ready, but then also are they all emotionally ready?
Yeah.
And I like the context that CJ will always bring up around retirement is not like the end of it all either. Like when you go to sell your business, usually people are like, okay, what's next? And I like to look at it as we like to look at it as, think of a football game. Halftime does not mean the game is over. It means there's another half to be played here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it's being able to wrap that into the equation. So it's,
And
I think it's huge challenges you all are definitely taking into consideration, which is great.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is cool. You bring up the second phase. We just had a meeting recently with one of our clients, and they were talking about the second phase. They're excited about it. They're not retiring. They're going to keep working at their practice, but they're not going to be the business owner any longer. And I think they're excited about what that means for the balance that they're going to get in their life, what other things that they can pursue that maybe they've been putting on the back burner for all these years, but they still get to be a vet. They still get to do, what their passion is.
Yeah. Well, so like when we think about selling here too, because there's a certain amount of clarity that needs to be communicated within the financials. Because it's talking about like preparedness, are they ready mentally, financially, and of course I know the numbers have to say a good story, and I'm sure also you two going in there having conversations. But on your end, Matt, like how are you helping clean up the numbers and tell a strong story to the people that are looking to buy?
Okay, so yeah, it's a good question. So one of the first things that we do is we do a free valuation, and we gather, part of how we do that is we gather some reports and some financial reports, two or three different reports from our customers to be able to allow me an opportunity to dive into their numbers and check their margins. Basically what I'm doing is I'm checking all the things that I know from the private equity side they're going to be looking at, and they're going to say, these are the things that make a good company to buy. And I'm also doing it so I can try to think to myself, what are all the different things that I can identify about this practice from a numbers standpoint that make it attractive to that group or that buyer? We also, in this process, before we go to market, we gather a lot of data. We gather questionnaires, we gather pictures, we gather a bunch of information as we work with our client to ask them also, what are the things that make your practice different? What are the things that make your practice unique? And so we're able to kind of consolidate all of that information into one package, if you will, that really does a good job of representing what the practice is. And then part of what I do is I actually work with every single buyer and really have conversations with them about what I'm representing, who they are as people, what is the secret sauce to the practice that really makes it be such a great practice? Because every practice has unique aspects to it that make it really special.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on that a little bit, when we do evaluation, I think it's so much more than just here's the value of your practice. Really, what we're trying to figure out is the face value of your practice and how much more value we can add back there. But beyond that, Matt kind of touched on this a little bit. When he's looking at the margins, when he's looking at the cost of goods sold and all these things, a lot of times we're able to go back to our clients at that point and say, hey, listen, here's the value of your practice today. But if you're able to fix X, Y, and Z in 6 months from now, it might be worth $3 million more, $4 million more. We might also look at it and say, hey, you're not in a position right now that you want to go to market because there's a lot here that you need to clean up. And the minute you go in front of a buyer, they're going to look at all this, they're going to see that it's disorganized or whatever it may be. And you might lose that opportunity there. So, the valuation is really a good kind of starting tool to just give you enough information to see like where you're at. So here's the value of your practice. What does that mean in terms of, the market as a whole? You can't paint every practice with a broad brush. Obviously we're looking at certain things that are generally true across the board, but you don't know what the market means for your practice until you talk to somebody like us and we can kind of walk through everything with you and say, okay, now that we know what's going on with your practice, now that we know where you're located, how many doctors you have, how many exam rooms you have, here's what it means for you specifically versus here's what it means generally for the market. And so that's one of the reasons we offer that free valuation, is not only to just give you like, hey, this is what it's worth, but to be able to advise you on what's best for you in terms of going to market or not going to market, or what you can fix so that you can just increase the value of your practice. So it's a really important tool that that not enough people honestly take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. The evaluations, it's amazing talking with owners. And I love the first question we like to propose to people, because a lot of their finances, their life is going to be dependent on that future sale.
Yep.
We're trying to show people how to not do that, but a lot of people are in that position. And you ask them the question, hey, how much is your practice worth? And there's always this thing of like the value versus price as well, because something could be worth X, but then someone else sees more, they see more value in what's there. And I see a lot of these buying groups too, why, they see so much more opportunity there, that, they also have got investor money and some other things to support that effort. But it's like being able to like, okay, how does all this fit into the equation? And, just to kind of wrap things up here too, is like, if you were talking to someone who's not ready to sell, but wants to be prepared, let's say they're in the next coming years, what's one thing they should start doing now?
I think you have to be preparing. And a lot of times the gold standard is they tell people you want to prepare for 1 to 2 years before you're actually going to go sell. And the reason that people say that is because you want to, there's so many things. You asked me to give one, I'm going to have to give several because I think it's really important. But you want to have a team around you. You want to have a tax accountant that's really good so they can help you with tax strategy of what does it look like when you sell. You want to have a financial advisor, because how do you make the decision to sell your number one or biggest asset that you've built over these years, and you're kind of going into that like second half of, air quote, retirement? You've got to know what amount of money you need to achieve your personal goals for what that looks like. You also need to identify or have an M&A attorney. I think that's a really important component to going through an exit. You got to make sure you have the right person for that. Now, sometimes people aren't fully ready with those things when they come to us, and we start talking about those very early on in the conversation so that they can I think we help them a lot with being able to fast track that. So it's not like they need that full couple years lead time. But one of the biggest things that I think is really critical is your business needs to be on an uphill trajectory. You need to really be showing that your business has got the capability of doing things. A lot of people say, well, gosh, my business is doing so well right now, it's not a good time to sell. I want to enjoy that moment. But you've got to be very cautious, because you don't want to be going up that hill and then hit the top of the hill and then go, okay, now I'm going to sell. Because a lot of the market will kind of look at that in a negative way sometimes and say, well, geez, there's not a lot of upside here. And that can hurt you. The other, I think, really important piece that a lot of people overlook is accounting. A lot of practices that we get working with, I'll look at their stuff to do the valuation, and I can very clearly tell that they may just have what I would call like a bookkeeper, someone who's just basically doing a lot of data entry and pushing it in, but they're not allocating it to the best chart of accounts. They're not getting the reporting that would allow them to see that their margins, meaning I buy a product for X dollars and I sell it for Y, and maybe Y. I mean, we've seen it. Some companies or practices are selling their products for exactly what they're buying it for, which means they're not making money. You have to have things marked up so that at the end of the day, when you're looking at your profit and loss statement, your profit or your gross profit is a certain percentage. Because if you fall too low on those percentages, it's going to be difficult to sell. It will create a challenge. And so I know that was kind of a long answer with many faceted points, but I think they're all really relevant and very important for everybody to understand.
And
I agree.
Can I add one thing there? And this is not, I'm not self-promoting here, but you mentioned all the different people you need on your team. You really do need a broker on your team, and it doesn't have to be us, but it's really important to have a broker, because I think that, I'll put it to you like this: when you go directly and deal with a buying group, more often than not, you're not going to get their best offer. Not because they're bad people, but because they're good business people. They're not going to overpay you if they don't have to. Tom, you mentioned earlier kind of like the difference between like a price and a value. When we do a valuation, Matt's giving you a face value of your practice. Like, this is what it's worth on paper. But there's a market value there too. And market value is more a function of demand and competition than it is your numbers. If you go to a broker and they're able to go to 15 buyers, 10 buyers, well, now you're creating competition, you're creating demand. And now your market value is going to surpass any sort of face value that you have. And so who's going to be able to do that? A broker. Why? You may be smart enough to do it on your own, but a broker has a track record. They know that if you're working with a broker, they're bringing in every single buyer that there is to compete. And so going back to the offers you're going to get directly from the buyers, they're assuming also that you just don't have the bandwidth to deal with all of this. You're a veterinarian, you're busy all day. You come home 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, you want to see your family. Do you really have the bandwidth to deal with 10 other buyers? The assumption that they're going to make is you don't. And they're probably right. Most veterinarians I talk to, when they're kind of trying to do this on their own, they're talking to maybe one buyer, maybe two buyers. And so those are the offers they're looking at. Well, that's what the buyers are betting on, is that's what you're doing. So when you go with a broker, that's not going to be the issue. You're going to be able to get a better price. Most good brokers are going to be able to pay for themselves. And what I mean by that is, through the delta that they can create beyond the value of your practice, that just a fraction of that is what you're going to pay the broker at the end of the day.
And the other thing to that point, Kia, is, because that's a really good point, the broker is going to have the knowledge base that I don't think everybody has on what are the synergies that these buyers are able to get. What are the adjustments that you should be taking advantage of when you're reviewing your accounting or your valuation model? Because being honest, oftentimes the buyers are coming directly to me saying, let's walk through these adjustments to make sure we're aligned, because they want to make sure that they're not coming in to me with an offer that's just too low and not going to get the job done. And again, I think you need a broker to be able to do that. It's a really good point.
I love it. Where can people learn more about 360 Vet Sales or connect with both of you?
Okay, I'll let you.
Well, I think one, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We post, we do these like very short form podcasts on there. They're like basically 3 to 5 minutes long. We call it 360 half seconds. It's where I typically ask somebody like Matt or hopefully Tom in the future a question and get their feedback. That's one area where you could see us. You could go to our YouTube channel, where we have a lot of those things already in place. So you can go back and look at some of the historical ones. But quite honestly, the best thing you can do when you want to know what's going on for your practice is just reach out to us directly. Because that way we can actually take a look at your stuff specifically and tell you what that means for you in today's market. And the best way to do that is to reach out either to Matt or I. I'm Kia, at KIA, like the car, at 360vetsales.com. And he's Matthew at 360vetsales.com. Get a hold of us. Let's just have a conversation. Let's see what's on your mind. Let's see what your goals are. And then let's take a look at your stuff. And then we can come back to you and say, well, based on what you've given us, based on what your goals are, here's what we think your options are for you specifically.
And we do have our website, and everything's available there at 360vetsales.com.
Yes.
And if you didn't get that, we're going to include that in the show notes. So if you want to get a hold of their email, the link to the website, their socials and everything else, make sure to definitely reach out, because from what I understand, guys, there's no cost to do that either, to have a conversation.
No,
No.
we don't believe you can make any decision about what you want to do in the future without having all the information in front of you. And so how can we charge you for that, right? It's about having that conversation so you can make better decisions. That's really what it comes down to. And if you do reach out to us, please mention that you heard about us on this podcast.
Guys, I really appreciate you both joining me. Thanks for taking so much of your time today to come talk with me and to all of our listeners on the show.
No, it's been great. Thank you.
Smarter Vet, if you found that this episode has been insightful, it's provided some new ideas for you, please take a moment to share it with another veterinarian or a few people that you know. And also, if you enjoy our show, would you please take a moment and visit either Apple Podcasts or Spotify and drop us a rating, because it really helps other people be able to find our show and be able to experience the same great content that you've been able to experience today. This is Tom Seeko, wishing you a lifetime of financial success. Don't forget to visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know about upcoming race-approved CE webinars, podcast releases, short presentations, and articles that we publish. Make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.